You don't ever leave, you never leave. Holes in his hands for the holes in my heart. Without his blood shed for me, I'd be stuck in the dark. I'm just being who I'm made, I ain't playing no part. If you searching for fulfillment, he ain't far. It's temporary to eternal.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Chad, your host. This is the Faith and Fitness Podcast, something that was born out of a journey out of what I think is one of my lowest times in my life. Excuse me. I had 75 hard presented to me again for my second time, and the second time around I did it with a different mindset, not just to complete it and say that I did it, but to actually gain the mental strength that Andy talks about in his podcast about the whole concept of it. That, I mean, it is a mental strength program more so than it is a fitness program. So I did it that way. Last time it was more fitness, more can I just do it, more because I said I was going to do it, so I was just going to finish it. And I did, but this time around, yeah, it was just a lot different. And out of that was born this podcast to keep me on track and to help me work through lessons that I think that I need to work through. And that's kind of what I've been doing the last 20 some odd weeks. Excuse me. So this week, last Sunday, I was at church, and it was the story of Abraham and Sarah, and I started just thinking about how some of that story relates to, kind of my journey and through this, and the thing that stood out to me on it was patience. And I just started thinking about, so I'm not going to read it all because it's a lot, but roughly Genesis 12 through 22-ish kind of gives you the time span of where the patience comes in, and the fact that they had not had a child, and in I think 12, somewhere around there, I could be off on my chapters, but at some point, it's mentioned that, Abraham is 75 and Sarai at the time, Abram at the time was 75. His wife was, just slightly younger and no kids. And, God kept telling him to just be patient and trust him and have faith, and they did. And I just think, that is a crazy long time to just have trust and faith in something and to just want to be able to give up. And, 83-ish years old, 83, 87, they decide that they're not going to be patient anymore and find another way around. If she can't have a child, then one of her maids can have that child for him. And they try this, and the whole concept kind of backfires on them. The feelings that they feel towards each other, resentment, and everything that comes with it, because it wasn't part of the plan and they didn't maintain their patience. And then over a decade goes by again, and it's not till Abram is 99 years old when God comes to him and tells him that he will be known as Abraham and his wife will be known as Sarah. And within this same time, the next year, which makes him 100, that they will have a child. So as I started thinking about this and how it relates to fitness and what we expect from our effort we are very impatient. I mean, we live in a society today where we can't even manage to get through more than a 15-second video, because that's what everything is, right? Like, that's what these short videos are, that's what these stories are. Everything's in 15 seconds because we can't keep our attention longer than that. In the marketing and advertising realm, I mean, the length of time that you're looking for somebody to be on your website is mere seconds. And that's a good thing if they make it on there for that long. Like, it's our ability to be patient and with anything that we do is nearly non-existent. And you think about what those two had to go through at the time, and it shows that we are, as human beings, are capable of patience. Now, from a biblical and faith standpoint, they maintained, for the most part, they are human, so they did falter, but they maintained their faith, and they had their faith placed where it was needed to be. And ultimately, God rewarded them for their patience, where we oftentimes don't have our faith in the right place, and we have many false idols, whether it be, the car we want, the money in our bank account, our houses, these celebrities that we put on these pedestals, or a bazillion other things, which, probably hinders our ability to be patient. And I'm for sure guilty of all this, and I've talked about that in the past. But I guess my point today, in what's going to be a relatively short message today, is in my personal. So we talked last week about my fitness journey, and there's been so many times where I've gotten super close to where I wanted to be, or where probably that last bit of plateau was going to end, and I would have made it to where my goal is. And due to my lack of patience, or excuses, or not having enough faith where it needed to be placed, I'd quit. I'd find a reason to quit. I'd find a reason to not continue. And maybe it was for the fear that I wouldn't get there. So if I just had a good excuse to not keep going, then I couldn't fail. I don't know. Anyway, and that's happened several different times. So this last 7 months it's been some of the best highs, and it's brought its lows for sure. But I hurt my knee, what was it, probably right at the beginning of the year, I want to say, maybe right at the end of last year. I think it was when the kids were on winter break, so sometime around then. And I have this marathon that I've talked about now for the last 6 months, and coming up next month. And it would have been a beautiful excuse, and I say that in the sense that I used to use these excuses, to just quit and to give up. And I hurt my knee, I couldn't keep going to the gym, I had to take some time off, blah blah blah. Now, there's probably some truth in some of that. I probably really should have. I did, however, baby my knee quite a bit. My rucking and hiking has definitely taken a back seat. But I have stuck with some level of fitness, and with keeping to some level, I've been able to kind of overcome where I normally hadn't when it comes to patience. It's super easy to talk yourself out of something, or to listen to that other voice. it's definitely a lot harder to maintain faith in yourself and faith in that if you feel like you're doing something that God had intended you to do, but we want instant gratification and we want the result right now. It's super easy to find an excuse and just stop. So as I listened to that story last week, and I thought about just like the time frame, even between, that last year, even the whole year where you're told this is going to happen, but it's going to be a year, 1 year later, that you'll see. Like, that's a long time. We have a hard time committing to anything for that long. And maybe I should say me. Some people I think are maybe capable of it, but I'm going on 7 months, and there's been times where I find myself starting to fall off the wagon with, my food, my second workout, and some of my routine. My morning routine, like I've said, it's pretty built in, so that's pretty easy to maintain. But not seeing the results of some of my evening routines based on mentors that I listen to on what they feel they've gained out of it, and me not seeing it. And on fitness, like you set a goal that you're gonna be this lean or weigh this weight or lift this amount, and it doesn't quite happen. So it's super easy to just lose patience and find an excuse as to not do it, or adjust your goal or reset it to something else. But you can't. You just have to maintain, and you have to keep going. And with fitness, I think it's one of the hardest things. It's the easiest thing to cave on patience, because it just takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication and a lot of pushing through being very uncomfortable. I also think that on this journey of faith or mental strength or even business, that the fitness part, although seems the hardest, it's the best medicine for the other areas, because what we can learn and what we can overcome in that significantly can impact the other areas. Putting yourself through super uncomfortable workouts and feeling that pain and you just can't go anymore, and then you realize that you can go more, that is the mental strength. Do you physically benefit from it? For sure, but you learn that what you can overcome and what you can sustain, and you transfer that into other areas with your spiritual, your faith. And there's some really hard things that you sometimes have to overcome, and you learn that you can. Or with business, there's times when something goes super, super south and you think that's it and you are done. But if you've learned that mental strength, you can overcome a lot more than we think we can. So we're heading into March now. Statistically, most people have failed on any New Year's resolutions that they made for themselves. But if you haven't, if you're still going, or if you still haven't maybe started them yet, I encourage you, just whether you are religious, have faith or not, just to read those several chapters that I mentioned. And even if you just view it from an educational standpoint on patience, if you view it from that eye on that you can wait. You are capable of being patient enough to see the results you want. It's just hard to accept that the timeline might not always be what you think it should be, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. just like fitness goals, right? Like I've set goals and said, you know, in 6 months, this is where I want this number to be. And something happens, my knee, whatever else, and it doesn't happen. So it's super easy to want to give up, but it's like, well, maybe that just was the wrong timeline, but it doesn't mean that I quit. It just means that I keep hold on to my patience and I keep fighting. And I have all intentions of doing that. Like even this marathon that's now coming up in 3 weeks, my knee after the gym today was, it's on fire. So I'm a little concerned about it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to at least go for it. I figure worst case, I get picked up. But I won't know if I'm capable of doing it if I don't at least try. And sometimes that's like the biggest thing, right? It's just taking that first step. We talked about Bedros and his marathon challenge, and he trained for 6 weeks and did it. And if you listen to him explain it, it was completely miserable and brutal. I mean, to the point where he thought he was going to die, and the pain that he experienced and the injuries that he sustained and the length of recovery it was. Like, I'm not saying go do that, but I'm just saying if you don't start, you'll never know what you're capable of. And health and fitness is something that you can just choose to start today. Like you don't need certain things to line up, because you can do it all for free. So you don't even need money, and you have the time. I guarantee you have the time, because we all waste entirely more time than we think we even do. So you just start, and then it sucks and it's super hard, and then you remember that you're capable of being patient and knowing that the timeline that you might want something to happen might not be the timeline that it's supposed to happen. But it doesn't mean that you quit. You just maintain your patience and you keep fighting, and eventually you'll get to a point where you can have a switch flip and see that, yeah, I am very capable of being patient, and I'm very capable of fighting, and I'm very capable of overcoming. So think through what your resolutions were. If the timeline doesn't seem to be going good, don't give up. Just be patient, keep fighting, and you will get your results. But don't sacrifice the results based on the timeline. If the timeline needs to be adjusted, then adjust it. But don't say, well, I tried, it's April 1st and I don't have my six pack, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing. Yeah, don't do that. I've done that before. It's some of the few times in my life where I felt regret on something. So don't do that. Keep fighting, and you can overcome and achieve. Anyway, God, I'm just grateful for, your word and your grace, and the fact that it just seems when I sit in a service at Washington Heights that it's almost like you're speaking to me and telling me what I need to hear. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for your grace and love. And I know that I can do hard things with you on my side. And I say these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So get back on track if you've slacked on your resolution. And don't make them resolutions. Just set goals and just achieve them. And be patient. We'll do this again next week.
Bloodshed for me, I be stuck in the dark. I'm just being who I'm made, I ain't playing no part. If you searching for fulfillment, he ain't far. What's temporary to eternal? Eternal. What's temporary to eternal?